So how do you feel about this relief?
Pete, it's good to see you, mate. And it's a bit surreal, to be honest, to see Malka Leifer and footage of Malka Leifer in Melbourne. This is something that the alleged victims have been waiting over a decade for. It was 13 years since she fled to Israel, and it's been a long and really exhausting and at times really difficult journey to get her back here. But she's home, and she'll now face the 74 counts of child sex abuse, and she'll have a day in court, which is what the alleged victims have been calling for all this time.
How do you comprehend or try to comprehend or even understand, Josh, how difficult it has been for those victims?
Well, Peter, I've had the privilege of getting to know them over this time, and the Adass Israel School is in my electorate, and this is a community that I am familiar with, and I've grown up just alongside, and you can't underestimate the isolation and the difficulty in speaking out in the first place, and to make that choice to say that this has happened to them and that they want to pursue their day in court is something that came with a huge personal cost. And Dusty, Nicole and Ellie are just remarkable people. They are brave, they are inspiring, and they are strong Australian women, and we're all very proud of them. But now it's a matter for the Victorian justice system, and I think that's what the Bring Leifer Back campaign was all about. It was about bringing her back so that she would have a day in court and they would have their day in court.
There must have been times, Josh, when those victims might have thought, is this ever going to happen?
Absolutely. I think that happened on a number of occasions. And of course, there were a number of trials and tribulations about the case in Israel, and there was 74 hearings, 74 different court hearings. She had outstanding representation. She had the best defence that money could buy in Israel. They were very, very competent lawyers. And in Israel, there is an independent judicial system, as there is in Australia. So she had the very best defences. They were masters in delay. And of course, there were even allegations of, at the time, the Health Minister, Yaakov Litzman, of interfering in the case and of interfering in this, in the analysis of her mental state to stand trial and to be extradited. So this has been a drawn-out and frustrating process that has been excruciating for all of us, but for the victims, for the alleged victims, it has been, unbearable at times. But we have finally got Malka Leifer back in Australia, and she will have her day in court today.
Yeah, it has been a long process, and we are restricted by what we can say because it is before the courts now, but it is a step-by-step process, and small steps, but they are steps, and here we are. Josh, just before you go, I just want to get you on a couple of other points. You're hearing today,
sure.
You're no doubt aware that Mark Butler may well be removed from climate change and energy portfolios. What do you make of that potential decision? It's been widely reported today from Anthony Albanese.
Well, I've only read the reports, as I'm sure everyone has. All I can say is that, I've gotten to know Mark and Chris Bowen and Richard Marles, who have been some of the people who have been mentioned in some of the reporting, and I find them all to be really great people. They're people of calibre, they're people of talent, and they're people of integrity. And anytime any of them want to come and campaign in Macnamara, they're all welcome to. But I think broader than that, that doesn't matter what portfolio people are serving in. It matters that we are all serving to try and get Labor governments, and we all believe in Labor governments. We know that the country would be better off under a Labor government, and while the coalition has worked with other states to help try and manage this pandemic, we are seeing a return to their instincts of reducing services, reducing support, and to be frank, this vaccine rollout was a lot more of government spin than it was delivery. So look, we'll have a strong team. Our shadow cabinet is full of really impressive and hard-working people, and I look forward to working with all of them in the lead up to the election this year. But the most important thing is that we get a Labor government at the end of it.
Joel Fitzgibbon says this is a good start, moving him away from energy and climate change. Do you agree with him? Has he got a point there? Because it's the working class, it's the heartland, Labor heartland, that is struggling at the moment.
Well, I would say that everyone in the Labor Party understands that climate change is real and that we need to be a part of the global efforts to mitigate it and to mitigate the human impact on our climate, because Australia is on the front line. We are one of the hottest countries in the world, and we saw last year the unprecedented bushfires that were devastating for our regional communities and our farmers and our agricultural workers. So we need to be on the front line. The other thing I'd say, Pete, is that yesterday the Biden administration took some of the most decisive and ambitious action on climate. But it's not just about the science behind it. It's also about the economics. That there is currently over a $2 billion fund in the United States that we want to be a part of, that the money is moving towards a more sustainable economy. And Australia would be very, very silly to lock ourselves into a situation where we aren't meeting up with the international demand. So I think that it's really positive that we are thinking about these issues, and we can no longer hide in the corner like what Scott Morrison wants us to do. On these international arena, we need to be a part of the global movement that takes care and takes action on climate change.
Speaking of issues that the Labor leader's coming under fire for, he's received widespread criticism for calling a referendum on Australia Day on constitutional recognition for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. Do you agree with him that it could well end the divisive debate on our national day?
Well, there has been a lot of divisive debate, Peter. There's no doubt about that. And I wrote a piece for the Fairfax papers on Australia Day, and it was talking about how it is divisive and how we do get tangled on the date. And I think that, in fact, instead of just focusing on the day, we should be focusing on what we actually want to achieve. And our National Day should be how we reflect and how we see ourselves. And I think that we can be a bit more ambitious than just the usual motions of arguing over a day. And I think that some of the things that we need to be focusing on and being ambitious about is about reconciliation with our first Australians, which is what Anthony was referring to, and what he wanted to achieve, and he was doing it in a constructive way, in a positive way, as he does. And the other big thing that I would suggest is that we should be an independent country, that young Australian boys and girls shouldn't be dreaming of seeking allegiance to the Queen. We should be seeking to become the head of Australia and the head of our state. So I think, head of our country. So I think that Australia Day and the debate shouldn't just be about a day. It should be about what do we want to achieve as a country. And when we get to that sort of place, then I think we can lift the debate a little higher.
And you want to move that day? You want to move that day and keep up that fight before Australia Day next year? Because the argument tends to go flat after Australia Day.
It does. But my point that I made publicly a couple of days ago was I don't think we should change the date. I think we should create the date. I think the day that we celebrate our country should be the day that we become an independent nation, and including and as part of that process, it should also be a day where we enshrine the 65,000 years of history in our Constitution. So I think there's a bit of work to do. I don't think it's as simple as just moving the day. I think it should be bigger and broader than that. And I think that we should be a bit more ambitious than just focusing on the day.
OK. Josh Burns, good to have you with us this morning. We'll talk to you soon.
Good to see you, Pete.